So can you all see the opening slide?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, right, that's all good. Okay, cool. So tonight, UCD Bristol, for those of you who are new to the event, it's a monthly meetup. We usually host at Amdaris, who are a sort of specialist software outsourcing company outsourcing is maybe the wrong word, but they're a specialist sort of remote software development house in Bristol. It's also sponsored by Immersive Labs, who I happen to work for as head of UX. And yeah, we tried to bring together kind of various user-centered design topics from research, sort of like tonight's talk, to kind of interaction design through to even spatial design and pretty much everything in between. We've had quite a few different speakers over the years. I've darkened the door on a few occasions as well. So yeah, thanks to everyone who made it out tonight. I'm just going to press on with this. So the talk tonight, those of you who are hoping to learn about web analytics, that one got postponed, unfortunately. Catherine couldn't do tonight. So as a result, she's doing the May meetup, which we're slightly pessimistically assuming will also be a webinar. And also, we've tried to take advantage of this. So actually, in April, we've got Paul Boag, who some of you may have heard of, UX author and kind of quite famous-ish in UX terms podcaster. So Paul is going to do our April meetup, which should be really good actually, because he lives in Bournemouth. He's been quite tricky to book in the past, so we decided to kind of get him in for this. So, right. The reason that some of you are here tonight, if you're not hoping to learn about web analytics, is how to do user research without leaving your home. Very kind of prescient topic. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam Babaji Pycroft, and I've spent the last 14 years practicing UX. Started off in working for AXA in financial services, really worked my way up, and then spent the best part of a decade running an agency, which, should we say, finished last summer. And then from then, I've gone on to become head of UX at Immersive Labs. So Immersive is a business that really is a cybersecurity business. It's about kind of empowering people within businesses to be ready for cyber threats. That's through a series of kind of practical exercises called labs, where they can learn skills through doing, but also it's about making sure that kind of larger organizations can understand how protected they are against cyber threats and kind of plan accordingly. At the end of the day, though, it's a business about people. So, you know, it's cyber. Cyber is something that I can imagine my kind of like teenage self laughing at saying that. But anyway, cyber is very much, you know, it's kind of a quite big sort of, it's quite a frightening topic, especially for non-technical people. So really just trying to bring this to life for people who are kind of in a level that's sort of right for them. So it's definitely about people as a business. So some of you may have seen some talks from me on remote user research before. I've done one at a kind of workshop at UX Bristol, which was on self-moderated. I've done various ones trying to convince people to do remote moderated. This one is not about convincing you to do it. Ultimately, right now, we're in some interesting circumstances where we need to adapt our practice, adapt how we practice UX, and especially user research, how we can involve users in our design process. And we've got to find ways around it. So what I've tried to do is, this is a completely fresh talk. I've kind of gone through, thought about end to end, how back at Natural Interaction, how at Immersive Labs now we go about planning remote user research. I've tried to put some stuff in there that's kind of informative around how to deal with kind of common issues that come up, how to ensure that everything goes smoothly. So let's go. And as probably not the time to be making excuses, but this talk was written probably pretty much today, because of our last minute reschedule. So I really didn't want to stop this from happening. So let's go for it anyway. But at the end of the session, I think the plan is we'll do a kind of general Q&A, general chit chat. People can kind of make their points as well, because other people have done remote user research. It's not like kind of 6 years ago where hardly anyone will do it. Quite a few people have probably done it. So let's jump into the subject. We'll start with planning. So as with any research, when you're about to do some research, you need to actually set your objectives. Are you kind of trying to, you know, is it formative? Are you trying to generate ideas by understanding your users better, kind of understanding their context, their problems, their challenges? Are you testing more hypotheses? Have you done that and now you're kind of thinking, if we do X, will it result in Y? and kind of putting those to the test? Is it kind of more classic usability testing? But the main thing to do is kind of try and understand why you're trying to find these things out, because that can help you define clear research objectives. Next up, you want to pick a research method. So in this session, we're going to focus mostly on qualitative rather than quantitative research. So this could be depth interviews, it could be usability testing, it could be kind of demand validation type stuff, it could be various other qualitative research methods. Ethnographic research is quite perhaps more difficult to carry out under the current circumstances, but that's not to say that maybe you could convince someone to just pop a webcam on in the background of whilst they work at home. That might be quite fascinating at the moment. But ultimately, you need to pick how you're going to execute that research based on the objectives you set. You need to make a clear plan as well. So actually, at this point, you've got your objectives. You decided what you want to do. Because of the factor of you're not in a room with participants, the circumstances aren't quite as controlled. And ultimately things like bad technology, poor internet connections can come into play. So especially if you're working with a distributed team, it makes sense to come up with a very clear plan for what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, when you're going to do it, and what everyone's responsibilities are to make that work. That just really, for me, it really de-stresses it, knowing precisely what we're going to do, who's moderating which session, who's analysing what, when are we presenting it. All those things are really important. Next up, so write a discussion guide. And those of you who do use a research kind of qualitative regularly, you're going to know how to do this. So the main thing is to ensure that you have a repeatable discussion guide that people can kind of go through, and ultimately, if you've got a distributed team, you're not necessarily all in the same place, you're taking it in turns moderating. Make sure that people are broadly following the same outline to the session. Remind everyone to ask why as well. That's always a crucial skill in research. Just, don't always take things at face value. Kind of try to quiz your participants, not in kind of a, why, but, in a kind of more subtle sort of, okay, that's really interesting. So can you tell me more about that? That type of thing. Ultimately, those kind of standard user research skills that you may use on a regular basis, they translate pretty well to this. You need to pick some software to make it happen. So there are a range of video conferencing tools. There's kind of specialist UX software like Lookback as well. My weapon of choice, you've probably noticed, is Zoom. Generally, as I said, there was a slight hitch when we were getting on here tonight because it was the big 500-person license, but generally it's pretty straightforward. And I can share a link, actually. People for Research have a blog article on their site about kind of picking the right software. I'd say there are two key points though. One is try and find something that is simple to set up and fairly reliable. I found Zoom quite useful in that context. But actually, if you're doing a lot of B2B research, if you're, all of your users, all of your participants are on Skype for Business, chances are you're using Skype. I generally say pick the software that makes the most sense for your participants, and be open to using multiple tools if that's how you can get the most reliable access to users. So once your participants are actually in the session, if you're testing maybe a website or an app, you need to make sure that they can actually get access to them. Because in a lab condition, it's really easy just to type in the URL. It's already there for them. Maybe you've got some credentials written on a Post-it note, and they can log in. My main tip here is try shortening your links. So use something like bit.ly, but don't stick to the default. Maybe just combine like two easy human readable words that you can pronounce over the phone that aren't difficult to comprehend, rather than kind of going lowercase z, uppercase f, 2, and then accidentally saying uppercase 7 or something, which doesn't even work. And also, prepare any credentials. So if your participants are testing software, for example, this is something we've been doing a lot recently, make sure you've got the logins for them, that they're working. Just try and take like a lot of that hassle out, unless you're testing the login screen or the registration journey, of course, which is something you might choose to do. Also, make sure that what you're testing works go on to it on a non-work connection. Don't have VPN on. Just make sure you can log in. Make sure that the solution works. Those of you who work in an agile environment, you might be testing rapidly developed software that may be continuously moving. So it's really important that you ensure that your participants are able to actually do the tasks that you have planned, and that the credentials and links and things you've given them work. So that brings us nicely to participants. First up, you've got to, the best thing is when you've decided on your objectives, you probably know who you want to research with. So it's worth creating a screener. Even if you're doing your own participant recruitment, it's worth trying to understand who it is you want, what the negotiable things are, because, for example, if you're recruiting on job title, you might want some people with specific job titles, but actually, really, if you get down to it, you want people who have those responsibilities and that level of seniority within an organization. So create a screener that's quite thoughtful and flexible, because not everyone has sensible job titles these days. And you need to work out how to recruit participants as well. So far, we've been working with Roots a lot recently, and they've been still getting us participants during this. I think the dropout rate has been slightly higher, probably because the first couple of days are slightly chaotic, but ultimately there are a range of different places you can get participants from. So you could go to, these screening companies. You could go for more of a kind of self-service approach with Respondent. They do a lot of good work. It's kind of a platform you go on, you put your screener in. Testing Time is again a web-based platform, but I think it's more of a Wizard of Oz thing where they then go and find you people. You could go on LinkedIn, try and find some participants yourself. And there's also friends and family as well. But actually, what I'd say is generally friends and family are unlikely to be representative of the participants you need. They're also going to be worried about offending you. And, especially if you are stuck in a house with them for the next few months, it might get awkward. So generally, I'd always advise with user research to try and get properly screened participants if the budget permits, rather than just getting kind of anyone you happen to be friends with. And actually strangers would be better, but at the moment perhaps not. Make it clear what you expect of participants as well. So this is another key tip. Especially if you're paying a participant recruitment firm a fair amount of money to get you some participants. So it's important you let the participants know what's expected of them. Usually the participant recruitment firms are quite good at this, but key things are tell them, go somewhere quiet. If you are, in the middle of the busiest room and there's loads of background noise, it's not going to be a good session. For usability testing or depth interviews, for example. You need a reasonable internet connection. It doesn't need to be amazing, but look at the minimum system requirements for, say, Zoom or whatever it is you're using. External headphones and mic, it doesn't need to be like a kind of special Jabra type thing or like a really nice headset. Just literally phone, the stuff that comes with people's smartphones is normally adequate. And ultimately, encourage them to test it all works before the session. There's nothing... generally when people first use one of these type of tools, it can be a little bit worrying. That without the time pressure, it's a lot better. Most of these things have test links now, so you can go in and make sure all the tech works beforehand. So it's important, if you tell participants those 4 things, you're going to have a much smoother session, and ultimately they're going to be able to get access to actually access the session as well, get their incentive. Because ultimately, if they're happy to participate in research, they don't be spending like half an hour trying to get everything working and then not get their incentive because they couldn't participate, right? So this is the fair thing to do. Just make it very clear what you expect of your participants. Give permission to reschedule as well. So actually, especially at the moment, things are pretty hectic. Actually, if you say to participants in the response to them when you invite them, look, we'd rather you let us know if you can't make it and reschedule, because quite often people, if you don't give them that permission, then they'll just assume you're going to be angry, and then they won't tell you, and then you spend a frustrating 15 minutes sat there waiting see if people are actually going to turn up or not. Again, like participant recruitment firms are quite good. They'll usually phone the participant on the day, give them a little cue to do it. But again, just being flexible and making it clear that, if you can't make it, it's not the end of the world. All we want is to know, and we'd love to reschedule you if you're interested. So let's talk about running the sessions now. pretty much kind of a combination of moderation and analysis, not necessarily the kind of meta-analysis afterwards. We'll get into that. But how do you actually go about running these sessions remotely? So first thing, make sure your own kit works. I know this sounds crazy, but you've asked your participant, to sacrifice some time to be there. And if you're doing this for the first time, please test it out. Test it with a colleague. Make sure that the actual gear works to do this. You want to probably record the sessions as well. You might have someone taking notes live, but if you're looking to do highlight reels afterwards, then recording the session is a really good idea. Tools like Zoom have built-in recording. Using it for the session tonight, but actually for user research, I'd recommend picking a separate tool for audio recording, such as ScreenFlow or Camtasia. The reason for this is then you can get 2-channel audio, and when you're doing your highlight reels, if you want to take the moderator audio off, it's pretty simple. You just mute that track. Video editing is, it doesn't have to be too daunting. These tools have a fairly low barrier to entry. Plenty of tutorials online, and YouTube can get you up to speed with these. But basically, recording your research will make it easier to relay later. We'll get into that in presentation. Connectivity issues. So this is bound to happen. People are going to have challenges getting on. Sometimes their broadband might not be as good as they were told by the people who sold it to them. It's probably not their fault. Sometimes there might be 3 people working from home on their router. It's not particularly great. So ultimately, it's about ensuring you're going to get connectivity issues regardless of how much you try to prevent it. So usually I'd say try and reschedule participants, say, can you go somewhere with better connection? But right now that's a little tricky. So I'd say probably worth, when you first get on the session with them, ideally do it with your camera on, their camera on, just have a chat for a couple of minutes, just check everything's, just ask them about their day, warm them up anywhere as you might for any research session. But just make sure that the connection's kind of working before you get too far into it, because then ultimately neither of you invested too much time. So session analysis and notes, something I found really helpful is to run 1 to 2 sessions with like kind of almost completely free form notes, like just kind of look at everything, start to try and spot patterns. And then if you're working with a distributed team, it's really important that you have clear common standards over like what level of notes is acceptable. Something I like to do after the first couple of sessions is start putting together a framework. Someone in the team might kind of go, okay, well, these are common things. And then they start to put together a structured document. People can put feedback in, put the results of the sessions into. Obviously, you don't want to miss anything that doesn't fit into your kind of model of how it all works. But creating a repeatable framework makes it easier to do analysis with a team who are kind of spread across several places, which, realistically now with distributed teams doing remote research, at least, for the foreseeable. So after you've run those sessions, you probably want to put it all together. So the first thing to do at this point is refer back to the research objectives. There are 2 key reasons for this. One, you want to make sure that the research may not have actually achieved all of those objectives, and that's an interesting thing to note at this point. But also, whoever's encouraged you to do the research, you might be doing it off your own bat, of course, but whatever the reason you're doing for the research, is always good reflecting that and considering that when structuring the report. Talk to each other. So, put your cameras on, as painful as it can be sometimes. Talk to other people who are potentially involved in the research, whether they're moderating, whether they're analysing, whether they're kind of stakeholders who are just getting a bit involved. Make sure you talk to each other. Don't just keep it to Slack. Slack is a really useful tool, but again, sometimes just discussing things, talking over your perception, telling stories to each other what you saw can reveal some really interesting research insights. You could also use digital whiteboards as well. So if you do affinity mapping, for example, as part of your analysis process, tools like Miro, Mural, there are probably a bunch of great open source ones out there as well. Or if you don't have money or can't get access to any of those, Google Sheets is kind of it's a little bit more painful, a little bit more difficult to manipulate, but you can do it. But basically, research, I would say, is very much a team sport. You need to be able to collaborate with other people who are who are kind of conducting this research with you. So if you can start putting your key findings from each session on something like Miro, you can drag them around, manipulate them with your colleagues, group them logically, and hopefully then those kind of patterns should begin to emerge. And then it comes to presenting research. So I'd always say my principle for presenting research is show then tell. Typically, I like to show the people who I'm presenting the research to videos or anything else we have that shows the users and how they participated, how they conducted it. I think that might have been a question then, but we'll go back. So basically, the idea is to actually show people how this stuff works. And then you go back, you then recap, you kind of go through what the main issues were, what the challenges were, what participants did, that type of thing. So this is an example of what a research slide might look like. So this is after you've perhaps showed a video highlight, you may then summarize. So we'll break down the anatomy of this. You might have a quick, clear, snappy title that summarizes the issue or the observation. You then break down what did we actually observe. Then why do we think it's happening? So what does the science say? What the kind of usability best practice say on this? What do things like Gestalt psychology say? Or is it just something obvious that, you know, the button was too far down and no one noticed it, which is interesting in itself? And what should we do to improve it? So, and then here also, grading, like, what's the impact? So what was the impact on the user? How bad was it for the user? Did it really throw them? Was it something I didn't really care too much about? And how often did it happen? Was it every session? Was it occasionally? So the reason I break things down in this way is I think it helps promote discussion. Generally, as a profession, I think sometimes not every UX is great at taking feedback on the research they deliver, or there is this sort of thing that, we're the experts in X, Y, and Z, and we probably are, but that's why I like to break it down. So we say objectively, what did we see? What were our participants doing? Why bit? This is why we can kind of look very smart and start talking about proximity or something, but this is very much about talking about what's the rationale? Why do we think this has happened? And then we've got recommendations. So effectively, it might just be simple. Well, you could just move that button. But doing things in this way, when you present it, you can then begin to talk to people about what we observed, and then talk about the recommendations. Good ideas can come from anywhere. You might end up, some of those remote whiteboarding tools might be good at this point if you want to brainstorm things with the other people who are on the call with you as you present it. The other thing, actually, because you're explaining stuff, sometimes it is easier to explain in person, but ultimately, again, this is about kind of showing things. If you can do a very quick low fidelity wireframe or sketch just showing like your suggestion, I've got to admit, I can't sketch to this standard at all. But generally, if you can just pull something together very quickly that shows your recommendation in context, it'll make it infinitely easier for the people making the decisions about the design to understand what you're suggesting. So you need to create space to discuss your recommendations as well. Basically, don't just kind of go, this is a recommendation, next slide. Actually kind of, throw it out there. Ask anyone, do they have any kind of feedback or concerns or suggestions, or, ideas as well? Because actually there may be some great ideas from kind of maybe places you wouldn't expect in your organization. A few years ago, I did some stuff in quite a heavily regulated business, and actually a few really good design decisions came from the compliance and risk team. I wouldn't have expected it, but they came up with great ideas. We put those ideas into a prototype, tested them, and they really worked. So it's one of those things that, the more people you have, I don't believe in design by committee, but I do kind of almost believe in group ideation. I think when people can all come at it from different angles and share ideas, share suggestions, then we can do better work. So yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, I went through that pretty quickly, but I think a lot of the value in these kind of talks is more kind of discussion and trying to work out kind of what people think. So I saw there were a couple of maybe comments or things that popped up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and just go back on camera. And then I'm going to get the Zoom window. So there are a couple of messages in the chat. Oh yeah, so someone was quite happy with the so V. Thanks for your feedback on the Insight canvas there. So I'm just going to open this up now. I don't think I've got the kind of, hang on a second. No, I don't have the hand raising feature on here, so I think we'll just make it a bit of a free for all. Who wants to go first? Are there any questions out there?
I Adam, sorry, couldn't find
Ian.
the mute button. Yeah, that canvas, that reviewing canvas. You flash at the that again, so we can have another look.
Definitely. Okay, right. So that's the canvas.
That's the one. I don't know whether the bandwidth jumped. I didn't get to see much detail on that. So thank you very much.
Okay, cool. I'll move on to that's the breakdown as well. Just kind of the anatomy of that. So yeah, typically the way we usually use this is we'd probably produce one of these for each issue. There's also kind of an observation version as well, where we don't necessarily make a recommendation or we don't necessarily drill into why. And the other thing as well is occasionally we use this to share positive information. So like, for example, some people might, if we have something that performs really well with participants, we often will put that in here as well, just to, help people know whether we validated assumptions around design.
That's great. Thank you very much.
So next question I've got is from in chat. So any recommendations for asking consent to record participants? Send an email beforehand /specific form /ask in the actual session. So that's a really good point, actually. It's critical that if you're going to record your participants, you warn them about it. Basically, so the way that we've done this in the past is typically the research participant firms who get them for us, we will make participants aware of that. We'll also put it in any calendar invites we send them. And yeah, I think like often we don't mention it right at the start of the session, but it's all about making sure we do have informed consent first. The only reason we don't always draw attention to it as soon as the session has started is because we have been abundantly clear before, but also it can put people a little bit more on edge. It can take slightly longer for people to, to open up and start answering questions. So there is a fine balance to be struck there. So next one is from V. Tell us more about user recruitment, please. What tactics would you recommend for a small team where we don't have dedicated researchers? So actually, I'd say that almost if you don't have a team of dedicated researchers, often finding participants is not a good use of your time. When I was small business owner before, I was super careful about budgets. I was always trying to, save money where I could without compromising on quality. And one of the real challenges was we did try our own participant recruitment, but on it, I don't think it's a good use of a team's time. I think that there are people who specialize in doing that. If you are going to do your own participant recruitment, though, you could compromise on kind of a sort of self-service platform like respondent.io. You can go on there, you can screen on kind of various things such as LinkedIn or Facebook profiles. You could also, if you have a current kind of CRM, you've got permission to contact your customers. You could reach out to them as well. I sounded very American there by saying reach out, but we won't dwell too much on that. You could maybe ask them to participate. So really, often I would always say when you're asking people to participate via an email, try and send them to a form first, so then they kind of put in some basic information about themselves, and then you just manage expectations that you'll contact them if they're relevant. Otherwise, you might have to run a lot of research sessions with people who don't meet the screener, or and ultimately it's going to waste both of your time, which as a small team you probably don't want to do. So next up, we've got Jenny Hoffman asking for ideas on moderating discussion remotely on Miro. So I had an interesting experience of this. Towards the end of last year, I moderated it was kind of a information architecture and ideation workshop with a massive group of people. A load of them were in Sweden, some more in Switzerland, just to confuse me. A bunch of people, I think, in London, and then like various other places in the UK. What was really interesting about that session is I think so Miro has a presenter view, and I think the way I made it work, we had a few like language barriers, and a few people didn't realize that they were even supposed to be doing anything in there. They'd just been told dial into this meeting. So I think retrospectively, one of the clear things is to set some objectives. A facilitation technique I tend to use is kind of, I think it's sort of 1, 2, 4 all. You can do different size groups though. So effectively, if people have come to I think people can often like be dominated by one really vocal person, or like the kind of metaphorical hippo in the room, who dominates discussions. So what I say is always get people in when you facilitate workshops, especially remotely, get them to do something individually first, get them to pair up with someone afterwards and discuss it and iterate between them. Then maybe if you've got a massive group, again, just keep doing it. And then when you've got maybe 6 groups left or 3 groups left, get them to present their ideas back. Just kind of keeping that structured, like short time boxed activities will help any session you facilitate flow smoother. But it's especially important remotely because you don't really know if they're going off and just checking their emails or something as well. So if you can get people to get their cameras on, that's always really helpful. So next up, a question from Pamela Smith, who may be familiar with from Immersive Labs. So Pamela has asked about, do I have any tips for helping participants during a session without giving them too many prompts? So I have that can certainly get uncomfortable, can't it? I have a rule of 3. So usually I'll let participants try to do things themselves kind of 3 times before dropping any hints at all. The way that I tend to start with hints is reframing the question. So it might be that actually it's a deficiency in my discussion guide. So I might start asking people, I'm trying to think of a specific example recently. So on Immersive Labs, we have, you're in a lab and you've got kind of a virtual machine, so maybe running Windows or something, and that's got a virus on of some description. And the participant needs to read some background info, which is on one tab, and probably answer some questions on another, whilst also doing stuff on this lab. So we were testing it out, and one of the participants didn't know that they had to answer questions basically to complete it. So I started by just, after they looked, it clearly wasn't obvious to them. So I started just saying, okay, so what would you do next, and how do you think you'd proceed from here? So just kind of asking very open questions. Without coaching them, and just seeing if they can kind of come to their own conclusion and go, oh, okay, yeah, well, I need to do this, I need to do that, or they just read something again. So that can work. Sometimes though, you need to realize that you don't have a lot of the research session left to get through all the other tasks, so you might need to give them a hand and just say, hey, if you could just click on that questions tab. Okay, now what do you think is happening here? So it's about trying to, I guess, let them try themselves, then try like broad kind of opening, reframing the question, reframing the problem. If they can't do it and you need to move on, just accept the fact that was, a task they couldn't complete, that will go in the report, and just move them on. Cool. So does anyone else have any questions, either on chat or on the audio?
Hi, Adam.
Hey, Martin.
Nancy. Hi. Thanks for the talk and the suggestions. That was great. I just had a couple of things I wanted to offer.
Oh, cool.
I've run a bit of remote research, and one thing we've discovered is that despite all the testing you can do, some of the sessions will always fail. So we've always tried to have a couple of layers of fallback. So for example, if the screen sharing doesn't work, that you talk people through the prototype following screen by screen, which isn't great, but compared to throwing the session away, is a kind of something you can have in your back pocket. And we've even also held on to a PDF and sent that through, so that if the prototype fails, worst case scenario, you can at least get them to look through. This is for usability testing.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, my takeaway of that is always be the Boy Scout and make sure you've got something, if that's useful to you, got something you can fall back on and make use of the session. The other thing I wanted to say was that we found it useful to take advantage of the setting So like compared to the lab, if you are asking the participant to go through a, say, form where they have to enter a reference number, in the lab, they're kind of imagining, whereas we've got quite a lot out of asking people to actually, you know, go to your office and get that thing. Where would you, you know, do the real task rather than imagining the task? And because they're in their own setting, there's a lot of rich information you can get about how difficult that is for them, and you kind of pick up some background. So, you know, making more use of that.
Yeah, that's a really valuable point, actually, Martin. I think you do get those kind of additional behavioral insights, because most people aren't using your websites or applications or services in, you know, in a sterile lab-based environment, are they? They're kind of, you know, the likelihood is they might be, you know, on a sofa or something. So it's definitely about striking that balance. And I think, like you said, actually saying, well, you know, can you go get that reference number for me, please? That's a great tip. So I've got another question from Pamela in the chat. So any tips for sharing feedback with stakeholders when they may not be open to the changes being suggested? Yes. So what I'd suggest is maybe even before the session, go to them with just effectively the observation. So say, hey, you know, we've got this debriefing session on Wednesday or Thursday. We'd love to go through this with you. One really interesting thing that we observed in the sessions was that participants couldn't do X, Y, or Z. Could you just have a think about it and let me know if you have any ideas? And the advantage to that is they're then they have a few days to come to terms with the fact that there is potentially a problem there. I mean, some people won't go for that, and I guess that's how it is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is making sure that you don't just tell them this stuff, you show them. So video highlights are pretty critical for kind of, you know, if people say this isn't a problem, and then actually you show them like 12 videos of people struggling to use it, then the conversation can kind of change quite rapidly. But I mean, ultimately, you know, sometimes people won't necessarily be especially, you know, be easy, I guess, from that perspective. I mean, that's probably, it's certainly a difficult, it certainly can be difficult to win people around. But again, it's almost, you know, it's without wanting to sound manipulative, it's how you can make them think it was their idea to see the great thing that fixes the problem. So I can see, so we got we got Darwin Pelton from Pilot Works, I want to say. I always get that confused, but yeah. So Darwin has another great technique for remote research is mobile diary studies. And actually, yeah, I mean, that's a really valuable thing that would help give some, you know, great insights. Darwin just wrote, as I was saying, into user behavior. And actually, like, kind of, right now we're in a really interesting time. You know, ignoring the, you know, obviously it's certainly not ideal for anyone, but it's certainly interesting, and people's behavior and patterns of behavior are likely to be very different to what we've experienced before. So actually it's a really good opportunity to you know, to understand more about the context and how users adapt to using our products now, and what we need to do as designers or as UXers or as researchers generally, or product managers or whoever else is on here. Basically, you know, what do we need to adjust to better accommodate our user needs now that they may be changing rapidly? Okay, so next up, Natalie Evans. You mentioned doing a 1-2-4 all exercise in a remote workshop with stakeholders. How do you practically do the 2 to 4 part of that exercise remotely? So that's a really interesting question. I don't want to sound like a shill for Zoom, but if you've got a Zoom Pro license, you can do breakout rooms. So that's certainly one thing that could work. Another thing you could do, like, say, you could always just say, hey, everyone, maybe you guys, you know, you all sign on to a separate call together, maybe come back together on here in half an hour. There's a few different ways you can do it. It can be tricky, but yeah, you can just get people to talk one-to-one. Some of the tech's there to do this now. Sometimes, depending on what solution you're using, you have to kind of hack around it, but it's certainly possible. So Martin Glancy has talked about ways. So asking consent, we're working with business users and they found they were happy to 1, send a simple email with simple consent documents, 2, reply to the email with their consent, and 3, cover the main points as a reminder at the start of the remote session. So yeah, I mean that's certainly a fair way to do it, and I think that's a very robust way. You know, you could guarantee your users were very informed about what they were participating in there. So yeah, Darwin in chat again, +1 for Zoom works really well for him. Okay, so we've got. Has anyone else got any kind of questions, thoughts, ideas, techniques that work for them? You know, things they just want to say to a large group of people because they've been in their house for 2 days and it feels like longer.
Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Whereby.com is a great solution for breakout rooms, because in whereby.com you can everybody can create a room or studio, and up to 4 people is free. So that is exactly what you want in a small group, for a breakout group. So whereby.com, I can highly recommend.
Fantastic. That sounds like a good solution. Is that a sort of freemium one? How does it normally work?
Well, it's free up to 4 people, and then you can have different teams. It's one of the, I did a whole research. Maybe I can share a whole list of AirMeet and all kinds of providers of virtual meeting spaces with all kind of different plans. But I just opened a studio room today at Whereby, which is free for up to 4, and you can also lock it if you are in there. And the nice thing also, if you want to do one-to-one research, you just send a link for the browser to your person, and the person literally only copies it in their browser address, and then they in your room.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a great way to do things. Cool. But yeah, if you could. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
We as an organisation have used for some time Microsoft Teams. That's free of charge. Organisations, you don't have to pay for that. And then you set up a group chat, or you can split and do subgroups. So you can choose whether you have a management tier, whether you have a UI UX tier, etc., etc. And people just share, and you can upload photos. You can do webinars like this. All sorts. So anything that's obviously Microsoft and free is worth sharing.
Definitely. Brilliant. Well, thanks, Kate. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I can see that we're probably getting to a kind of logical conclusion now. Has anyone else got any kind of further questions, comments, ideas they want to share, or should we wrap up?